For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. Friends, hear these words from a luminary of the living tradition of Unitarian Universalism, of which I'm a part, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, who I think expands upon this idea. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to acts of justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. And it is my great honor and joy to be with you all this morning, friends, however you're attending and with us this morning. My name is Reverend Juniper Meadows. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a tall, curly-haired lady in purple preaching robes and a clerical collar, and I got glasses and a chalice pendant. It's a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. My stole has a Luna moth and mountains. I'm from Appalachia. You might get a yawl once in a while and a chalice at the bottom. I've been told I don't have a southern accent. Don't make me bring it out. Just joking. It is my great honor to be with you all this morning and to do some of the work of unveiling these bonds that bind us all together. For indeed, we are theological cousins of a kind, polity siblings, a shared history, the Our Whole Life's curriculum developed between the UUA and the UCC that has opened so many hearts, helped to teach people about their bodies, how to love, how to be safe. We've done this together. It's a living present that we have too. And I believe that despite any differences, we have a fire alike unto each of us, the same love binding us together, the same spirit of charity. I have often heard that passage in Corinthians, and perhaps you have too, as being about love. Love and charity, love being an expression of goodwill. The word charity works too, but for my purposes, I'll be referring to it as love. Now, it was a wonderful celebration of love our communities took part in yesterday at Heartland Pride. I hope that experience filled your hearts, those of you who were there. Some folks may hear that word pride and leap immediately into some sad sort of pride that goeth before falls. Certainly not this community. But, of course, we are celebrating that pride that arises when you can be yourself and nobody else in the midst of a time that calls us to stay small and to separate, and indeed to suffer. This is how we may love our neighbor as ourselves, and love ourselves as we love our neighbor, even as we are told to divide from communities, from our own sense of authenticity, to give up our values and pursue some kind of boring, dull homogeneity. Make no mistake, the Pride Parade is a love parade, love of authenticity, love of community, to love for love's own sake. The Apostle Paul, in that well-loved and often cited passage from Corinthians, lays love out plain, naming patience, kindness, unfailingness, keeping no record of wrongs. Love never fails, Paul says. It is a rather exhaustive list. It pairs like a fine wine with that author in the Gospel of John when they have to say, God is love, and those who do not love do not know God. That's what I call good news, friends. Does it not seem, though, that love is in some short supply these days? As the theme of this guest series insists, there is a force attempting to divide us, an impulse to misunderstand, to move fast and break things, and people, and those bonds that bind each to all and all to each. I'm going to use a word, friends, a word that you have likely heard or perhaps used yourself. Fascism is the consolidation of authority, born through the piecemeal erosion and wholesale abdication of liberal democracy. I don't use the word liberal here to denote a kind of political party, merely the mechanism, the process by which we make sense of the world in the sociological, the cultural, the legal, the scientific, and the political realms of life, indeed, and the religious realms of life as well. At the heart of any liberal democracy is the dialectic, the relationship between a thesis and an antithesis, and the emergent synthesis. Richard Rohr, the Jesuit theologian, would put it, of order, disorder, and reordering. It's a sort of holy trinity realized as the self and the other, and the dynamic relationship between the two. Y'all know about this here at Tri-Faith, certainly. A new thing comes into being between the relationship we have with others. Isn't it magical? Isn't it special? As an outside observer who really appreciates United We Walk, for example, y'all have something really special here. You know that, though, of course. Something more from nothing but. It is the raw stuff of life, y'all. Evolution, process, spirit, insofar as the dialectic is a relational force, a means of becoming. It has this shape of love, of life. It is a glimpse at infinity. The German idealists knew they were onto something. All the world is undergirded by relationality. You can arrive here from reason alone, friends. The nuclear bonds holding atoms together to the gravity well of the sun and its dancing spheres to lovers holding hands at pride. Relationality is ever in the process of change, becoming, reordering. In our tradition of Unitarian Universalism back home, we had a sort of reordering recently, shifting the structure of our principles from a discrete list going 1 through 7 to a circle. A shape. They had to draw a shape in our documents with love at the center, holding the values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. And out of that, people found the mnemonic device, JETPIG. So you won't forget, friends, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity. Hey, it works. It works. It works. It encapsulates where we've been, who we are, and how we are becoming, because we, like y'all, are a living tradition. We are alive in the world. But love is at the center. This isn't new for Unitarian Universalists. We've been beginning worship in most of our churches, arguably, with that covenant by James Philip Blake, which begins, love is the spirit of this church, and then something thereafter, but it always begins with love is the spirit of this church. And now, for the first time, it's in our governing documents. It's in the denominational bylaws. It's a big deal. Love is at the center. A philosophy, a force, a theology. For Unitarian Universalists, a big deal. It's a good time. I imagine it like a realized version of Mark Miller's anthem, Draw the Circle Wide. I imagine many of you all know this song. You know it. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one is alone. No one stands alone. We are side by side. Last year at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly was a big time. In addition to the change in our values to finally center on love, 92% of delegates voted on a binding resolution naming the affirmation of trans, non-binary, and intersex people as a fundamental expression of Unitarian Universalist religious values. I almost dropped my phone when I saw that. That is big. This gives us legal and spiritual precedent to defend vulnerable people. When the heaviness of the world weighs on me, when I feel that cold fear, I remember that moment standing in a hotel room, my phone falling onto a bed. And I am held by a love beyond belief, a love expanding, drawing the circle of concern and compassion wider and wider still. And y'all know, it took a long time to get there. It took a long time to get there. It took a lot of trans Unitarian Universalists, lay folks, and clergy laying on the horn in the wee hours. It took courage. It took trust. It took faith, and it took love. I trust that this tradition, I know that this tradition and others are moving to realize such a radical expression, to draw that circle wider. At its best, this is what liberal democracy does. It reflects on itself and expands accordingly, ever mindful that the borders of what is deemed acceptable and worthy is often a place of violence. Borders of territory where unjust wars rage and genocides roll, borders of belonging where people are deprived of human dignity. Boundaries, friends, may keep us safe as individuals. Those draw a line between ourselves and the world that state we are enough. But borders that we uncritically put around others too often curtail human dignity. Borders, for example, such as those in some states or in the United Kingdom, preventing trans folks from accessing restrooms, for example. Such a simple thing, and yet for us it is too often a calculus of survival. I have been blessed to not have to think about this that much. By the way, I am a transgender woman. To not have to think about it as much these past few years, but there was a time, and I will still, for my own sense of safety and well-being, never be in a room alone with a child, period, because people have all kinds of terrible ideas. People have all kinds of terrible ideas, and so we must keep ourselves safe. Trans people know this. We feel it often. Sometimes we live under the thumb of other people's perceptions, portrayed as predators. If we are to be a people of love, we must center our perceptions out of love, accepting the world and our neighbors as they are, where they are, and as they are becoming, beginning and ending in love, one that never fails, a love that is equivalent to God. Such a love must insist we organize against such a force and call it what it is. Though it go by many names, the governing forces and principalities of our times are not unprecedented. Pardon my poetics, but it is like a living devil of fascism. It is hatred. It is greed after power for its own sake. There is a riotous and chaotic quality to the fascist impulse, but it can just as well be about efficiency, defined as a moral virtue. Hear that again, friends. Efficiency as virtue. This is the very spirit of those Doge folks, the Department of Government Efficiency folks, the belief that any inefficiency is a violation, is immoral. And while I myself prefer an efficient system to an inefficient one, it is a consideration of convenience and not a moral one. Too often, we mistake comfort and convenience for the good. Yet, is it not written, woe to those who mistake good for evil and replace sweet for bitter? When efficiency is at the center, what happens? Well, love withers and people die. Why? Because people are inconvenient. People get in the way. People are challenging. Why are trans folks in the scope's eye? Is it because we are more challenging, more difficult? Wouldn't it be easier just to be rid of what is inconvenient? Of course not. We offer a unique perspective on the world, a living permission to all who meet us that it's okay and actively good to follow your heart, a promise written on the body of both the individual and on communities like this one, that you can be yourself in and still belong. Fascism hates that, absolutely despises it. A liberal democracy that would be radically inclusive, it might find itself clogged up with indecision once in a while. It's not necessarily the most efficient system. That is okay. This underscores a vulnerability, however, in the liberal democracy, one which the fascist impulse takes advantage of and hacks into in order to fleece the economy, enrich its vanguard, to use the legal machine to restrict belonging into an ever-shrinking demographic of sycophants and loyalists, hence why it's sometimes referred to as the fascist death drive. It is an inwardly facing cult of power, a bald eagle, ripping out its feathers until flight is entirely out of the question. In the will towards raw efficiency as a moral good, people are rendered disposable, and all covenants of care are broken. The only way to fight against this is to be love's hands in the world. In manners both grand and subtle, you don't know what you do does, as Foucault likes to say. You might know what you do, you might know why you do what you do, but you don't know what you are doing is always doing. Sort of butterfly effect of actions. But we know that we are called to be love's will, force, presence in the world, in manners both grand and subtle, to understand action as prayer and push back at the enclosing borders, prophetically insisting on a radical inclusion. Not because it's easy, friends, Not because it's efficient, certainly, but because it's the right thing to do, because love demands it from each of us, because the troubles of our time require all of us and all that we are. Existential crises, wicked problems, the tragedy lies in the absence of obvious answers, right? There is a grief in the face of all that has happened, fear for what could come next. We may not always know what to do, but we must remember who we are, that we may discern a sense of who we will be, how we will be, and who will be with us. Too many elected folks have made the suggestion that the inclusion of trans folks into the progressive political platform costs elections. They seek a thing to blame and may as well look in a mirror. It is the stone-hearted willingness to discard vulnerable people in general that landed us where we are, an assumptive apathy that such small demographics, so generally removed from power, are politically expendable. We've done this with all kinds of people. People of color, people who don't speak English, disabled people, gay people, lesbians, bisexuals, trans people. We do it because people are challenging. But love insists that we lean in anyways. Love against challenge. Love as challenge. Because love never quits. Love never fails. And so love is not in the words of these leaders that would make such terrible suggestions, but love must be in our words and deeds, and also, friends, grace. Not so much for those who have power and sit on their hands while parroting righteous talking points, but for those whose hearts are opening, on whom the ice is thawing, on whom reality is dawning, who newly grieve for the days, even as some part of the world's wounding lies on them. Grace for grandma struggling with pronouns. Grace for our spaces not yet fully accessible. Grace for our not being able to communicate clearly across borders. Not complacency, grace. Room to grow, to become, to heal and be healed. Without such grace, I would not be here. If we are honest, I imagine many of us would not be. This is a practical politics of grace, one centered on life which makes room for the wandering and the wondering without letting the powerful off the hook. A mind that is critical without being cynical. A heart that is open without giving up its authenticity. Such a disposition is, for trans folks, I believe, the path forward which we find belonging in. Not to endure abuse, never. Not to sit through ridicule, but to remember that proverb, a gentle answer turneth away wrath. Stay present. Insist on your dignity. This goes double for our cisgender allies. The bells are ringing, friends, and you are called into care. Do not abide the misogynist, racist, transphobic joke. Insist on getting folks' pronouns right, even when it's hard. Do not blow off people's pronouns. Trust that it matters, and try like someone's dignity depends on it. Like it matters, because it does. It can take time for us to arrive at love's table. The hour is late, yet all are still called. I remember playing music with my grandfather in my mid-20s, some years after I'd come out. Papa struggled with pronouns, He struggled to see me as his granddaughter, We still found cause to play music together, living through life's imperfections, yes, and hurt feelings, the heart that aches. One day, Papa put his guitar down and told me that he'd gone out of his way to watch a Caitlyn Jenner documentary. There were better things he could have watched, but we all get home how we get home. And he apologized to me for what he had said and what he had failed to say. All was put to rest. Even in the midst of misunderstanding, love was alive there because I was there, and because he was there, and in the midst of us, a new thing, an open heart. It's a difference. It's proof positive, friends, for me that change is possible so long as we remain in what ways we can that are safe, proximal, close enough to tend the fire and to be warmed without being burned. For those who wonder, what do trans people want? I can only speak for myself, but I imagine I speak for a lot of us when I say that I want to live. I want to be in the world, with the people, as a person, witness to as the woman I have become, the one I have always been and am still becoming, striving to harm none, living so as to magnify and maximize love and agency in the world. I want trans kids to not have it as hard as I had it. I want them to grow into healthy and happy adults. I want them to believe that love is the greatest force in the world, the breath of life, the thing that makes us real, to love and to be loved. It is so, so hard. My fellow trans people know this, how hard it can be to just get out of bed some days. Some days it's just pure spite that pulls you out. Some days it's just impossible, and the ceiling is our comfort. Some days are like yesterday, though, or the evening when I stared mouth agape at my phone, seeing the mark that love had made on my faith community. Some days, and more often than not lately, though, I find that I am proud to be trans, but more so to belong, to be a minister, to be an artist, to be a wife and a daughter and a sister, an aunt, a friend, to simply be and to love the life that I have been graced with in a world that screeches sin and abomination, all that bitter racket drowned out beneath the song that none of us are alone, and the knowing coupled with the faith that humanity on the whole is still maturing. We just got here as an animal, much less a culture, a people, right? Still very new on the face of the earth, making our mark. Remembering that, even the most red-in-the-face bigot is capable of fundamental, radical transformation. Grace, friends, a gift, room to grow, not room to be hurt in, room to grow. I have been made new by the love of others and the God of my understanding, and I have to believe that this is possible for all of us. Far shot as it might seem some days, it is still worth holding out hope. But hope, we who live upon hope will what? Die fasting. What must be done? Firstly, we must insist enthusiastically, prophetically, that love does not leave people out. Period. Go tell it on the mountain, friends. Love is big enough for us all. Such a love is the root of organizing real coalitions. There's that word, organizing. What does that mean? It means meeting your neighbor, loving your neighbor. You know what it is. You're here at Tri-Faith. This is how we build real forces for good, forces for political organizing. Politics is often like a dirty word, that word political, to some folks, but it's no time to be keeping ourselves too clean. Life is political, faith is political. You can't keep pure in a world so thoroughly wounded. Be with the trouble and make good trouble and build power. For politics is fundamentally about the actions of often powerful people which move the systems of power themselves. It is by this that we do the work of expanding our moral imagination, awakening new possibilities of what is possible in a life, and come to better know both our neighbors in this world and ourselves. By this, we build power. You might be thinking, power? Little old me. You may be thinking, I'm not powerful. Maybe not on your own. Perhaps we think of power as being evil, the thing that hurts us or is hurting us or hurts the people that we love. And power is indeed the hammer that harms, but it is also the hammer that builds. What is it Pete Seeger says? If I had a hammer, I'd bang it in the morning, bang it in the evening. It has been said that power corrupts. It's true. It's true. Anyone who's watched Spider-Man knows that power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. What corrupts more than power? Riddle me this, friends. What corrupts more than power? What sickens the soul so thoroughly? What truly hardens the heart? Hate? That's a good one. You're going to get this. It's okay. Powerlessness. Powerlessness. It is the empty root of despair. I'm not saying people who are powerless are corrupted. I'm saying that this is what hardens the heart. This is, in my mind, what Jesus talks about when he says those who deny the Holy Spirit this is an unforgivable thing because you can't let it into you. You're shut off from power, from the possibility of things ever getting better. That is why it's the root of despair, the lay down, the complicit apathy. It is hate and it is fear. But powerlessness is the heart of both of these, arguably. And such powerlessness is so often born out of real grief and real experience. It can harden our hearts to love, leading us to sorrow and spiraling thoughts. Nobody has me. Everyone has it out for me. Nobody holds me. Nobody cares what I think or say or do. We gotta stop. We gotta stop. and turn to our neighbor. Find places like this. Encourage more places like this, that people can be connected. For the central task in really any community is unveiling the bonds that bind each to all. We must turn to one another to experience belonging, to be warmed in the presence of the neighbor, the other, and get real about the need for power if love is to have the day. The great luminary of liberation, Dr. Martin Luther King, reminds us power without love is reckless and abusive, right? Obviously. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So we must build power, which we do how? By folding our efforts into local, national, and global initiatives. You'll know. By raising and wisely allocating finances towards liberatory endeavors, especially smaller local initiatives that would rely on things like grant money that no longer exist. By raising and making and connecting community to live in, to celebrate in, to thrive in, to worship in, despite the troubles, because we are going to need houses of worship, places like this, places of all kinds and all sorts, where every name of God is lifted, where no name of God need be uttered, places where the silence on still waters is named sacred, places where it's just a cup of coffee and a friend, or a stranger, someone who isn't a neighbor yet, but is a neighbor already. Maybe learn to love our neighbors. Maybe meet the world as it is. In this future, with faith and reason, honoring our fear, rooting in courage, claiming our power, yet centered always on love, ever expanding. May we be as love's hands, hearts, and righteous wills in the world. Amen. Prophetic Church, people of love, this world with all of its heartbreak and all of its grief, it awaits your liberating ministry. Maybe go from this place and be fools for love, absolutely audacious. Maybe be pilgrims for justice, striving and persevering, and until we meet again, which I hope is soon. Maybe rock, roll, and move towards that spirit of beloved community on the horizon. Go in peace, friends.